and welcome. You're tuning in to Unbreakable Hope with me, your host, Jessica Rose. This podcast is all about seeking the light. In each episode, we chat with someone who has either overcome the darkness or who is actively spreading light within their own community. So let's jump into today's episode. Today, I am absolutely thrilled to introduce you to a sister queen who is also in the Petite USA system. We have with us today Mrs. Kentucky Petite, Danette. Let me tell you, her and I have way too much in common, but so amazing to share. She is a speaker. She is an advocate. She is an author, a podcast host, has a TV show. This woman is doing amazing things, and she's also a mother. So wearing all these different hats, I am so excited to be sharing her impact that she's doing in the community and what she has overcome and how she is using it to spread light to others. Well, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate you being here.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I'm so excited about our conversation. We have a lot more in common than I think either of us knew. We've actually met through the Petite USA system. So I would love for you to be able to share what is your official title and maybe tell us a little bit more about how did you hear about the system, what you're most excited about.
Awesome. Thank you for giving me this platform. My name is Danette Mahabeer-Turner, and I am Mrs. Kentucky Petite 2025. And for like about 3 years, I've been, seeing it on my Facebook. It just pops up on my feed. I know last year in particular, I did apply and got some emails about basically getting to the semifinals and different things like that, but never got the official state title holder. So this year I was like, I'm going to go back for it. I had way more on my plate this time anyway, being a part of various boards and, different initiatives in the community. And so I got the semifinals. I didn't get too excited because I've gotten that before. And then when I got the official email that I am the state title holder, I was like, oh my gosh. So I'm super, super excited.
I love that. I'm excited to have you as part of the system and be able to meet you in Chicago in July.
Yay.
So, what are some of those boards and some of those initiatives that you're on in your community? Because I know you do a ton of stuff and I'm excited to learn more about them.
Yes. So I am on a suicide prevention coalition. I'm also on the board called Family Service Society, where they help with food, clothing, medical, dental, vision, and stuff like that for those in need or less fortunate. I'm also on a board called Paducah Diversity Advocacy Board, and PDAB is the acronym for that. We focus on DEI initiatives, so diversity, equity, inclusivity, and stuff like that, in the community. And I'm also on the Paducah Chamber Area of Commerce board, where we're like the marketing and connectors with all the small businesses here in the community.
You mentioned being part of the DEI group. I know that's something that is very near and dear to your heart because you yourself come from Jamaica. Would you like to share a little
Yes,
bit more about what that was like growing up there and moving to America and what?
absolutely. Yes, I was born and raised in a rural part of Jamaica called Clarendon. It's like about 2 hours from Kingston, just to give like, a point where we were located down south. I was raised in a single parent home. My mother was the breadwinner of the family. I had four other siblings. We weren't very privileged. We had a big yard with lots of fruit trees and stuff like that, but my mom was always at work, so I started cooking from a very tender age of 11 years old. I could cook you the biggest meal, the most gourmet meal,
Mm.
because my mom would work late hours and very long shifts. So when we come from school, we had to like cook dinner so that when she comes home, she had something hot to eat, and my siblings were my friends. We played hide and seek. We played a lot of like outdoor games. We improvised with whatever we had, and we had a very good relationship growing up.
Your siblings here as well? Are your siblings still in Jamaica or what does that look like now?
So my younger brother, he's in the United States now, and my younger sister, she has a U.S. visa, so she's been going back and forth for work purposes. So she got that through her work, but she doesn't live here. She still lives in Montego Bay, Jamaica, and my older sister and older brothers are still in Jamaica, never visited the United States.
Oh,
I
wow.
know, because you need a visa. See, a lot of people don't understand. Like, in Jamaica, you have a U.S., you have a not a U.S. passport, but you have a passport. You cannot just enter into the United States without going to the embassy or the US consulate and pay a non-refundable fee. And it's not guaranteed that you will get admission into the country. And we don't really know like why, like the particular basis of why you're denied when you are. But you could try a few times before getting it. You could try a lot of times and still never get it. So a lot of my family never got the opportunity to visit the United States.
Wow, that's so interesting. I think that's something I've definitely got to learn a lot over my husband's journey in and out of the hospitals as I learned from a woman from Africa that there's like this lottery system. So if you sign up for certain
I
careers,
heard
then you
about
could get
that.
the lottery. So I love getting to learn more about that because I think that is a
Yes,
huge
yes.
misconception for people. Our immigration system, I think we can all agree, is wild in a
And
simplistic
I
term.
mean, just to add to that as well, like I myself, when I came to United States, I came first. I was denied the US visa at one point. I was like 18 years old, had a big American dream since I was 8 years old. Like my cousins, they came for a funeral. I fell in love with their accent. That was my first time trying Pop Tart, like all the American candies. I wanted to go back with them, but I didn't understand the process and I was crying. And so ever since the age of 8, I was like, I want to be in America. It was a big dream for me. And so at 18 years old, I was like, okay, I'm going to try for the US visa. And I did. The money was non-refundable. I was 18 years old, as I mentioned. I took all my savings. I was very distraught. I got denied. And a few years later, I tried again. And then I got a 10-year visa where I can stay in the United States for 6 months at a time. And I have like a 10-year span to use that as needed. I then got married and migrated to United States permanently. And people don't understand as well, like the process of becoming a United States citizen is it's a lot of details and it takes a lot of paperwork. I remember having like a temporary work visa just so I could get like a social security. And I have like 10 different driver's license because they would expire so often because the work permit would expire so often while you're waiting for like your permanent resident green card, as many people know it. And then even to become a United States citizen, you have to study the history that most Americans don't even know. And you have to pass this history test in order, and of course, do like an interview, biometrics, and different things like that before you're like sworn in, as a United States citizen through naturalization.
I have a friend who she came here from Mexico. Is her sister, her brother, and her mother all came over here, and over time, more of her family came. And I remember her sister had they were young enough, but her sister, by the time the age came, her sister had to take the test, but she was young enough she didn't have to. But her grandmother had to take the
Oh
test,
my
and
God.
she told me that I'm so old. I get the luck of taking it verbally. And she was so excited. And it was just such a cool experience getting to hear how excited she was and how the process went for her. And yeah, I see all the time the quizzes online that's like, could you, a born American pass the citizenship test?
Yes. I would challenge everyone that watches this interview just for the fun of it to download the United States naturalization test. And you can practice and it will give you questions. It will just give you like flashcard questions, multiple choice questions, and you'll be surprised how many of those answers you do not know. So, it's just it's very funny how we have to like, go through that to become, US citizen through naturalization.
Oh yeah, and then what parts of the history, like who chooses those questions? I'm sure there's like a whole board. But I remember one point I thought like of all the questions, like those are the questions that you want people to know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
have you ever heard the show Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader?
Oh, yes. Yes, definitely.
That's what that makes me think of. Like maybe we learn something in little kids school and we definitely don't retain it because it's not really that important.
I was never big on history anyway. Like when I was in high school, you had the option to do either history or Spanish. And honey, I chose Spanish all day long.
How many languages do you speak?
I speak, I would say three or four. Jamaica has a dialect. It's not an official language. It's called the patois. And it's made up of English, Spanish, French, and Dutch, and mostly broken English to say that. Um, and then I speak Spanish, French, and Italian. Italian is pretty close to Spanish because I worked at an Italian Renaissance hotel, one of the sandals brand in Jamaica. And so I had to kind of like learn it on the job. And I worked at a French hotel as well.
That's awesome. I'm just learning so much about you because I had no clue. I thought that I thought there was a language.
A language. Yeah, we're an English speaking country. A lot of people don't realize that. But our English is a little bit different from the American English. My husband and I, we laugh at each other all the time. I would use words that he's like, what does that mean? But we are under the British English.
Mm.
So we're very proper. We use words that mean, the same thing in America, but, he's like, why don't you just use this word instead? I'm like, well, like I would use a word, for example, scanty. And he's like, what does scanty mean? Like I'd be like, oh, the airplane was so scanty, it means it wasn't a full flight. We were all spread out. It wasn't a full flight. But and he was looking deep in thoughts one day, and I said, is everything okay? You look very pensive. He's like, what does pensive mean? And just to give you another one, we had dinner, and then, I was kind of still feeling for something. I wasn't hungry, but the word that we use is peckish. I was like, I still feel a little bit peckish. And he's like, what's that? And in America, a lot of people would say, you want to go over there? Well, we don't use a wanna, gotta. Do you want to? Do you want to go over there? So it's very proper.
So I'm on another podcast. I'm a co-host, and my buddy is in the UK. And just yesterday,
Love their accent.
he was trying to give me a clue, and he said, "So I'm curious what your answer is because once he realized that we call it something very different. When you have the line that you hang like your sheets on, how do you secure the sheet to the line to dry? What do you call that?"
Clothespin.
Okay,
I,
so
I call it a clothespin.
yeah, that's what I knew it as. So he calls it a peg and was literally holding it up, and I was like, "That's a clothespin."
Oh, wow.
So, I'm sure you have a lot of that with your husband. That's really fun.
I mean, even the accent, like, we do have an accent. And so we emphasize different parts of the syllable, like, cemetery and, like, they would emphasize different parts of the word than we do. And it kind of sounds, funny to them. It's almost like inventory. We said inventory. I was like, okay. So,
Interesting.
you adapt.
I know that you also have a podcast. You also have a
Yes.
TV program. So I'd love for you to give shout outs and talk a little bit more about that. And curious how many different accents maybe you encountered during some of your interviews for your podcast and your TV show even.
Yes. So I have a talk show and podcast called Voice Thoughts Talk Show and Podcast. I started it in January of 2023, and I am now in season 3. And it is a society-based podcast. So I tackle all society issues from domestic violence to HIV awareness, breast cancer awareness, just to name a few, postpartum depression. I mean, if it happens in society, we could talk about it. And I wanted to create that platform so that we can actually explore these topics without being confined to a particular, box of how far we can explore these topics. And so I've had guests who were either victims, they were, someone that went through a particular situation, or professionals like therapists, psychologists, and even mayors. On my show, I had someone that was actually running for mayor in Nashville as one of the guests on season 1. And I've had the mayor of Paducah twice, once in season 2 and once in season 3. So it is amazing. One of my biggest guests as well has been former NFL player George E. Wilson Jr. And it was a pleasure interviewing him, as well as the president of the Paducah McCracken County NAACP. That was very good to have JW on there as well. And so, I've made a lot of connections Accent wise, I would say yes, because in Kentucky, they do have the country accent. And so, you just gotta roll with the punches.
Definitely have a lot of different people on your podcast showcasing a lot of these important topics, like you said. And one of them that you mentioned, you yourself have a personal history with, and it's domestic violence. What would you like to share about your story as far as being a survivor and really overcoming that and now being an advocate for domestic violence?
Absolutely. Thank you for expanding for me to explain. So, I am a domestic violence survivor and author of a book called Leave Alive, subtitled Goodbye Domestic Violence. And I
Mm.
wrote that book after my personal experience, not to share my story, but I wrote it as a guide to help other victims and survivors overcome those challenges and obstacles. Because while I was going through it, I did not know where to turn, where to find the resources. Um, I didn't know what steps to follow. And even when I left and I moved from New Jersey all the way to Nashville, I thought, okay, great. My past is behind me. And I did not know that all hell would have broken loose thereafter. So I wrote that book to tell current victims, advise them on how to stay safe even after, how to leave without saying you're leaving, because that can get you in more trouble. I was 7 months pregnant when I left
Oh, wow.
and start all over. I was in the process of getting my documentation here in the United States of America, and that kind of got stalled a little bit longer. I had to get orders of protections, which were violated, and went back for extended orders of protection. I had to hire an attorney. I was worried about my child because I know that her best interest lies with me. Um, I was with a narcissist. And so that's another thing a lot of people don't understand, that abusers tend to have those narcissistic traits. And so in the book, I've also identified those traits to help victims, not just victims, but potential victims. If you're trying to date somebody, like things to look for, red flags, we call them, right? But there's a lot of things that you can see from the early stages. And I know a lot of people would say, well, I didn't realize this till later, which I was one of those person. But I hope that that book will get into the hands of those who will need that book to get educated on narcissistic traits, and so that we can identify them and then we can stay away from them.
I love that so much. I was in a domestic violence relationship myself, and I think one of the things that was so hard for me was once you realize it, is also figuring out how exactly do I ask for help, which sounds so
Yes,
crazy, right? But when you're in
yes,
it, it's like any other stressful or overwhelming situation is sometimes you can't even think outside that day. And I remember there was one person who I really felt reached an arm out and could tell that something was going on and wanted to help, but we didn't really have that close of a relationship. So I think it was kind of a light touching. And I think it would be really great. This is something I talk about a lot when it comes to suicide and overdose prevention is it shouldn't be that people who are overwhelmed and stressed out and unfortunately in these situations that we put all the pressure on. I am so excited about your book. I'm going to need a few copies because I have some people in my
yes,
life who could use it. And I hope that people listening you read this book too because it's important for you to know so you can look for
absolutely.
your friends, you can look for people around you, and then you can have these tips and advice to also help that person get out of the situation because it for me it went on way longer than it should have, and I'm very, very grateful that I mean obviously terrible things happen, but I'm really grateful that it didn't get to an even worse point than it was.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah,
Um,
I want when people, hear the title of the book, how detrimental it is to life. Leave alive. Because if you don't leave, you're gonna probably end up, So one of the chapters in that book, as to your point, even if you're not being abused, if you even have children, this book is for you. The first few chapters were dedicated to children. And like the very first chapter was raising warriors. And I talked about self-esteem in children. Typically, their self-esteem was low as a child. They find somebody who tells them how much they love them, how much they're loved, And even though they're being abused, they think this is the only love that they'll ever find because they did not get love at a tender age.
Mm.
And so, if your confidence level is low, your self-esteem is low, typically, not saying that confident women and men don't end up in these situations, because absolutely they do. And sometimes abusers prey on confident people because it gives them that ego, that little stroke that they need. But raising up your children to also identify friendships,
Mm.
working environments that are toxic, and relationships, that they know how to walk away from things that don't serve them. So this book is not just for abusers, and it's not just for survivors, but it's also for those who wish to advocate for domestic violence and those who are raising up warriors.
Definitely sounds like a powerful tool that many people could use. And as you're talking
Absolutely.
about raising warriors, so you shared you have a daughter. Do you have any more children? And what's it like being a mom? How's motherhood for you? That's one of your many hats or crowns that you wear.
Yes, it is. So I'm a wife and a mom, and so I'm married into a blended family. My husband is Korean and I'm Jamaican, so we kind of call ourselves a Jamaican couple. So I have a daughter who is now 8 years old, and as a blended family, I have a bonus daughter who is 10 years old and a bonus son who is 16 years old. So it's a very exciting blended family, and motherhood to me means the world. Sahila London is my birth child, and we have a very strong bond. Everything that I've experienced with domestic violence, she has been part of that journey since being in my womb.
Yeah.
And so she is, I tell her every day, I'm like, you are a warrior, because honestly, she is. Um, we've done a song together that just got released called Caterpillar to a Butterfly. And so she's on that single with me. And I think that song talks a lot about resilience. It talks a lot about transformation. When you think about the caterpillar and the phase that it had to go through to become a beautiful butterfly. And there's a particular saying that I stick with all the time as a philosophy. Just when the caterpillar thought that its life was over, it became a beautiful butterfly. And so it's a very powerful, inspirational, and motivational song. And just to have her on there. And even in my book, Leave Alive, there is a letter to my daughter in the very back of the book. And, it's just amazing that when I was writing this book, she wasn't even able to talk yet. And now she takes my book and read that letter all the time.
That's super sweet. I love how much you could just tell how much power and growth that you have as you speak about these events and how much you really truly are investing in your daughter and saying, "Hey, from the moment you were in my womb, you were part of this experience," and reaffirming that you are a warrior, you are great, instilling that confidence and really helping her grow to be an independent woman, to be able to go on and hopefully do amazing things that you're doing too, these positive impacts. You're involved in so many great groups within your own community and you're reaching out even further. I love that so, so much. As a stepmom myself, and one of our other queens that I interviewed talked about being a stepmom. Are there certain unique
Mhm.
things or maybe some tips or dynamics that you would like to share for step parents since you are in that blended
Absolutely.
family?
Absolutely. I would say, at the initial stage, get to know your stepchildren, get to know them for who they are and not who you want them to be. Get to know their personality types, because everybody has a different personality. They were raised differently before you came into their lives. They have moms, and there are things that they're allowed to do. And, sometimes we just have to learn what they are used to, their culture and the way they were raised. Not to say that you won't have an input in their life, but allow them to accept you for who you are as well. And so I would say accept them for who they are, grow together, learn about their preferences as well. The way I prefer to be communicated with might not be the way that my stepchildren prefer to be communicated with. And just different approach for different kids, like my own child, there's a different approach for her than there is for them, not to segregate approaches, but because of preferences. and personalities. So I would say get to know them for who they are, accept them for who they are, and allow them to accept you for who you are.
I think that's a huge piece of it is they have been raised differently. They're raised by someone else that has different
Absolutely.
values, different morals, different beliefs. I mean, that's how humanity works, right? We're not all the
It
same.
is.
So giving them that space and just taking that step back and understanding, I know that was huge for me because the dynamics between my stepson's mom and me, like we do have very different values and beliefs when it comes to a lot of things and having to know like, where is my legal bounds, right?
Right, right,
And then, oh, where can I be to just continue to support him as a human being as he grows? And he's also trying to navigate who am I and how does this
right.
work? And yeah, I think that's really important for both parties to grow. So, with all of this and the many crowns that you wear, what are some things that you do in, all of your free time when you're not being a mom, being a volunteer, making positive impact?
In my spare time, I'm very big on self-care. Again, because being a mom, being on multiple boards, running multiple businesses as a serial entrepreneur, being a wife, it's exhausting. It's something that we're passionate about. I'm sure you are, but you can agree that we do get exhausted because sometimes we're taking care of everybody except ourselves. And so I've made it a very, big, priority for me with self-care. I even started like a journal where, you could journal different things like your events for the day, but I've started journaling in the sense where what did I do for myself today? So October 1. And I'm very big on self-care, but I want people to also understand that self-care does not have to cost you a dime. You don't have to go every day and get a massage. You could literally take a walk in the park. You could take a longer than usual shower. You could read some affirmations to yourself. You could look in the mirror and spend 5 minutes telling yourself that you're amazing, that you could do hard things, that you got this, and different things like that. Maybe read your favorite book, watch your favorite movie, watch a comedy, um, have a glass of wine. These are all self-care stuff. Light a candle of your favorite scent and just watch it burn for a few minutes. So I've just started to document those in a journal, like October 1, and it's an accountability for me because I am able to say, oh, it's 7 p.m. I haven't done anything for self yet, so then I want to go ahead and do something like, oh, well, let me get my mask and my scrub or something and do something for myself, or make me a nice hot cup of tea, sit down with some jazz music, and I can document that as my self-care for October 10, for example. So I think, that's very important because you have to align yourself. And I tell my husband, I tell my children, if I don't take care of me, I cannot take care of you. So I'm very big on that. And traveling is part of my self-care. I think I'm addicted to traveling. Um, I was in Jamaica just a few days ago, and on the way back, I'm already trying to plan my next trip. And I'm like, it's just, it's my getaway. I get away with that because it's self-care, right?
Yeah. I love that for so many reasons. I kind of coined this like take five, just take five because
Yes.
I'm a full-time caregiver to my husband with brain cancer, like you, serial entrepreneur, volunteer, all the things. So free time, what is that? And finding ways to add in even just 5 minutes. We were in the
Yes.
hospital for almost 5 months last year. And some of the things that I did was one of my biggest take fives is I set a timer and I have to take at least 5 minutes to drink my tea and not do anything else because I'm a big multitasker. I do like 10 things at once. So just taking 5 minutes to be like, okay, I have to take 5 minutes to drink a tea, which sometimes my caregivers always laugh at me. I'll like sip on it and I'll set it down and I'll find it like 10 minutes later.
Oh, wow.
But then not letting myself do anything else in that moment.
I
So,
love that. I
like you
love
said,
that for
the
you.
longer shower, adding in like, I'll light a candle while I'm taking a shower, like little things. So I love that you said I'm journaling this as almost like an accountability. Like, hey, what have I done today?
Absolutely.
I haven't yet. Oh, mama's got to go take care of herself.
Yeah, you'll find that when you do that, you're less snappy, you're less agitated about things. You're in the traffic and you're so stressed out. But as you said, like when you have your nice cup of tea, you feel like you could take on the world. When you have that longer than usual shower, you think you could take on the rest of the night. Um, it's necessary. It
Yes.
is.
Definitely. And I too love traveling. That's something that I used to love to do. My husband and I both did it. We lived, I once said this and somebody took it the completely wrong way. So we lived very separate lives, but in a sense of we valued our independence from each other.
Absolutely. I
So
love that.
we still, of course, did stuff together, but he would go and we both competed in the military Paralympics. So he would go and do a training camp with the Navy and be gone for like a week. And we would joke, I'd be like, "Oh, I'm single." And single for me would be like, "I'm eating PB&J in bed at 6 p.m. for dinner." Whoop whoop. You know? And then reverse, I would leave for like a week for a training camp with the Marine Corps, and then he was single, and for him, being single was staying up till 1 a.m. on the couch watching TV, right?
Oh,
But we definitely valued our separate time and we did things apart from each other. So it's been challenging with having to take on this full-time role of caring for him and caring for his son and balancing those dynamics. So I finally this year have gotten back into traveling, not just for work, but also for pleasure.
I
So
love that.
I texted a friend this morning saying, "Hey, I am planning my trips for 2025 to alleviate my burnout. I would love to come stay with you for a couple days. When's the best time of year to come stay with you?" And I think that that's so important too, is recognizing like what really fills our cup. And for me, having to actually leave my four walls and be able to get a night's rest somewhere else, I have found to be one of the biggest alleviators of burnout and really helping forward my self care. But also, like you said, there's tons of free stuff that you can do too,
Yes,
finding what
absolutely.
works for you, whether it's free or it's a trip, and keeping these trips low cost, right? I got friends all over the world. Hey, let me come crash at
Yes,
your couch.
yes. And just being somewhere else, just gives you that fresh perspective.
Yes.
So,
And now I have a new friend in Kentucky.
yay. You are welcome anytime, friend. I love this because of the sisterhood that's involved with it. I'm so excited to meet all of the beautiful queens that I'm now part of the sisterhood with. So I'm very excited for this journey.
Yes, and it's so awesome. I'm super excited to be part of the system and I have a whole year. So we have a year to help support each other and then we get to see each other in person and it's going to be so much more exciting getting to meet people in person now that we've met virtually and connected over so many different topics. I'm just really excited, even more excited.
Um,
Well, this has definitely been a great chat. Like I said, I'm so excited to get to connect with you and see you in person. I'd love to
Yay.
give you a few minutes to recap. We've talked about so many different things, and I'd really love to give you a chance to hit some more key highlights, maybe show us a few things you have, and then we'll look at closing out this episode.
Thank you so much again for having me on your platform. It's been a great pleasure talking it up with you, and I do look forward to meeting you as well. Once again, my name is Danette Mahabeer-Turner, representing for USA Petite as Mrs. Kentucky Petite 2025. I am a serial entrepreneur, and I'm a motivational speaker and a national certified life coach, a national wedding officiant, and I also have a foundation called Mother-Daughter Relationship. Again, as mentioned, I do have a book called Leave Alive, subtitled Goodbye Domestic Violence. And as a domestic violence survivor, I am also an advocate. And I've started a TV program on Channel 2 in Paducah, Kentucky. And it's called Voices of Victory. And it's specifically raising awareness on domestic violence. In addition to that, I have my talk show and podcast called Voice Thoughts Talk Show and Podcast, tackling all society-based issues in our communities. And I'm just excited to have had this opportunity.
Yes, well, I'm really excited. Our listeners can check out the links in the description below for all the wonderful things that you're involved in and ways that you can help out and get connected. So, thank you again so much. This is such a joy. I'm so excited to be able to get to meet another queen and build a sisterhood and support each other as we go through this crazy thing we call life.
I know, and I'm happy to meet you in person. So I can't wait. Thank you again.
Thank you, listeners, for tuning in. If you found this episode inspiring, please share it with someone you never know who needs more light in their life. May this serve as a reminder that there's always darkness in the world. Do not let it consume you. Always seek the light. Please take a moment to do the good old subscribe, rate, and review. Your support means so much to me, and it helps me spread more light and love. Until next time, be kind, be loving, be human, and don't ever let anyone steal your hope.